Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, Alan.
Hi. My name is Alan. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Alan.
And I'm sober today by the grace of God and the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. No, I would like to welcome the newcomers, the new people. It's nice to have you here, because what's going to give me a chance to do is watch you grow and see the people among you who do work the program, and I will be able to see that the program does work in the people who work it. And you will be able to see what happens to the people who don't work it. And both messages are very, very strong. If you work the program, it works, you know. And so welcome, you know, and have a great time, and you don't ever have to drink again if you don't want to, you know, and you can have fun sometimes. I have there's a friend of mine named Eric who said to the newcomer, he was taking a cake one time, and it was you can only take this so far, but what he said was, when I got here, I thought I had reached the depths. You know, reached the depths. He said, I found out after 10 years of sobriety, I had only begun to scratch the surface of fear and anxiety. Have a good time, gang. I have a friend named Jeffrey who is very close with it. He has a very good friend in Detroit, and the friend's name is Roger. He owns a steel mill and has a farm outside Detroit where my friend Jeffrey goes on weekends sometimes. And they're very, very close friends, and the conversation went, Roger, how about the farm this weekend? Roger says, well, my aunt's dying this weekend. My friend says, well, what time? And my friend is very sober, but he's also very quick. Now, you know, you have to be tight to have a thing like that work. I am glad to be here, and it is a privilege. And every day that goes by, I am more reminded of what a gift it is that we have here, and a gift in that even as we sit here, it's free, and a gift that, you know, it looks so it looks just like a sheet of paper on the wall, but if we do these things, because I do these things, I don't have to drink today, you know. I may have if I get overly afraid today, I have a way to get away from that. You know, I never have to have the same kind of fear I had when I was drinking. I never have to have that again for very long. I have things to do, and it's all kind of listed out, right? You know, in the book. I was born in Kansas. My father drank a lot, and when he drank, he beat my mother, and I saw that once. And then shortly after I saw that, they broke. You know, they separated. So I was raised in Tucson, where it was very hot and very thirsty, and I had my very first drink, I think, was that I remembered feeling the effects of was we'd been out shooting in the desert, and the guy had a 6-pack of beer in his trunk, and in the desert, like in August, it's very warm in Tucson. And we'd been out for a little while, and we were all kind of sweaty and hot, and I mean, it was like, I'd been raised by my mother to hate drinkers and to not want to be if you just like your damn father, like this. And so lo and behold, you know, and I took this thing, and it just went, oh mercy, this is, you know, I mean, my thirst was kind of quenched. I did ask you know, the question that I asked time and time again. I said, is there any more? You know, because I feel pretty good with this, but I'm sure I can feel better, you know, if there's any more. And so that was the first time I became aware that it had the answers for me, you know, and it filled in whatever I was lacking at the time. And I continued to, I didn't really start anything horribly outrageous until I was able to buy it on my own, and then I bought it on my own. I drank all my own. And my father didn't drink for me, my mother didn't drink for me, my priest didn't drink for me, I didn't have a priest. I did it all by myself. And I became just like that picture that my mother painted of my father. You know, lo and behold, I was this beast she had created, and nobody was happier than me. I what? You know, and I was upset about it. I didn't want to. I didn't know how to just sip. And my first, you know, thing was like a quart of beer in 10 minutes, and the next week was a quart of beer and a quart of wine in 20 minutes. I just wanted to get there where we were going, and I always kind of went past where we were going, and I did, you know, I just drank to get drunk, and I was upset about when I was 21, and I was working in San Diego, and a guy who was working in Balboa, we were in Balboa Park at the time, and I'd been able, I had a motorcycle, and I was able to put 15 miles on a 10-mile trip just from the way I would ride when I was a little off the beam, and I knew, you know, something was wrong, and this guy came up to me and said, what's wrong? I said, it's drinking, I'm drinking, you know, do you want to quit? And I said, yes. And he said, well, here, smoke some of this. And I did, you know, and because at the time it was not real cool to be a drunk, and it was okay to be smoking because it wasn't an alcoholic, and you couldn't tell, and people, I mean, you couldn't tell until you could tell, and if you're crawling on the floor, it doesn't matter if you're drunk or stoned, but you know, I managed to maintain my uniqueness of being just a dope smoker for about a week. And then I realized, when I could finally focus, I realized that God gave me two hands. Drink with one, smoke with the other. And I got into it. I mean, it was my solution, and I went. So I wasn't just a drunk, you know. I just wasn't a drunk. But that was the only reason so I wouldn't drink. But it didn't last long. Booze always worked for me. Now I drank alone as much of the time as I could because I didn't like people much. I heard a great line about that. Somebody said, I hated people and they were everywhere. It's just, whoops, there's another one. And it's kind of hard. I was also cheap. The philosophy of dress British, think Yiddish. Had great appeal to me, and so I'm not sure if I drank because I was alone, or I mean I drank alone because I liked it that way, or just because I could afford to drink alone more than I could afford to drink at a bar. I also never got any fights home alone. Ken O'Brien used to say, I come from a dysfunctional household, I live alone. And it was kind of the case. I managed to build up to a state of maturity, being able to live in sheer terror. I was afraid a lot, you know, I mean deeply afraid, and whether it was the marijuana that did it, or the for some reason, there was not a lot of peace in my mind. And it kept getting worse and worse, and the only way I could kill the fear was to try and drown it, you know, and I tried to drown it, and I'd drown it for maybe 10 minutes, and then by God, you know, I could drink myself to sleep and wake up 3 hours later when it wore off, have to do it again, I don't mean to name drop. I used to get drunk with Barbara Walters. She was on TV in the morning. Good morning, Barbara, you know. Yes, here at the Casa de Allen, we have, you know, I mean, I drank in the morning, and I drank, you know, I figured any time my arms were moving, it was a good enough time to drink. So, but I was not an overt trouble causer. What was the phrase the insurance company used? A thrill-seeking risk taker. I was not. But now I had a roommate eventually, the guy who finally saved my life in the long run. I was working in San Diego and staying at a place called the Hotel Barcelona. I don't know if I don't even know if it's still there or not, but they used to there used to be an ambulance. I think you could only live there if you were over 95 and had a bad heart. And the ambulance would be at the door every morning and stuff. And this was not the place for a young would-be hippie drunk to be. And my friend came by and knocked on the door with Maxwell's silver hammer and said, "Why don't we move to the beach, man?" So we went down and we moved to the beach. And this guy was he was a bad drunk, an overt drunk. He had an old Volvo that sought out streetlights. It had a mind of its own. He said, I'd be driving down the street, and all of a sudden, that damn streetlight was just like this. I don't remember anything like that. And he would also, during a party, you know, it was a very social thing, but during the party, he would get drunk and then cause some commotion over here, and then scream out, you know, your name across a crowded room in front of all these, "Hey, Rap! Rap!" You know. And he would kind of, and he was horrible to be around when he was drunk. He was just horrible. He did a whole different change. But sober, he was a gentleman, a real honest-to-God gentleman. I mean, he'd been raised, well-educated. He came from good people, you know, good family, old Hollywood family and stuff. And he just had this one little drawback. You know, when he drank, he became an animal. You know, not a threat. Not a threat, but just got into, it was like having a basset hound with those puppy, with those big, just stepped in everything, everything, and that's what he was. I went over to his, and he was afraid too and stuff, but he explained to me later, he said the difference between us was I may sit home alone, and I'll drink alone, but he said, and he would go out and wreck cars and maybe get in fights and do things like that. And if he died in a car wreck, they would say, yes, that's what I would expect of Jim. He said, if they found you at home alone with your brains blown out, that's what they'd expect of you. Same disease, same ultimate journey. And, you know, so here we were, two really happy people living at the beach. And actually, you know, I got a tan, which was kind of neat. I am fish belly white by nature, and I've been burned to a crisp so many times. I feel, you know, but I got a tan. Went surfing once, made it back alive. Decided I've done it. I can talk about it now for the rest of my life, and I have. The waves were crashing about 3 inches above my ankles. There was the smell of death in the air, and a lot of wine. And anyway, that's how I drank. And now while we were there, this other guy came through, and this other guy was not only a loud, overt drunk, he was a threat. Dangerous man. And we drank around him. He kind of drank through and got into serious difficulty, threatening kind of thing. But he was so neat and so nice, you know, such a good guy, you know. And then drank and boom, all hell broke loose when this guy was around. Well, the guy who knocked on my door several years later called down to San Diego and said he wasn't going to come down and party anymore because he'd gone to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, that's really good, man, you should. I didn't know, see. And I saw him a month or so later, and he came to my chateau in Hollywood. It was a garage. It looked like a garage. It was a chateau. It was a garage. And that I lived in for free, and I did a lot of work on it when I was very drunk and stuff. And I worked very hard, and it looked like a garage when I was done. But he came over and he called it the Bat Cave, and because it was the only one source of light was out there, and it was pretty grim. But if you were drunk, it was just lovely, and a few candles. And he came over and he talked to me, and he looked different. He looked really different, you know. I had seen all this wild panic and stuff. There was some peace, some genuine peace. There was no guile in this guy, and he was there to tell me about what he said. Yeah, I've been going to this AA thing, and it's really nice, you know. And why don't you come to a meeting with me and see what it's all about? Not that he was trying to sell it to me or anything. He just wanted, which he was, but I mean, he didn't put it that way. He just said, you know, come and see what it is. So I allowed. The truth of the matter is 50% of my friends were in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had 2 friends. He was the other guy was out of town, and so I said, yeah, sure, I'll go, and I did, and it was one of those cocky things where you go, I don't, you know, yes, I will. I came to judge, and oh God, and I'm sorry, okay, but I mean that was. So I'm used to living alone, and the meeting that he takes me and being alone, and I should have been alone most of the time, and but he takes me to Brentwood on Thursday night, which was a large place, and for an agoraphobe or whatever, and there were all these people who liked him, you know. I mean, you see people with the newcomers now, and some, especially a newcomer that's trying, and everybody kind of wants to, you know, say, hey, you know, encourage him to come along. Get in, you know, and I saw it, and it didn't look phony. It was real. And I was really taken by it, because you guys did for him what I couldn't do. It never crossed my mind I should tell him not to drink, but he was growing into, I mean, it was really an attraction. And at the same meeting, the first speaker was a used car dealer from Oxnard, who, when he drank, he thought he was Attila the Hun. And I mean, and he was very funny, and he kept talking and talking, and the sound that I heard there at that first meeting, was me laughing, and I couldn't figure out what it was for the longest time. It's, oh God, I'm laughing. I hadn't done that in a long time, just to feel free enough to laugh, and it wasn't the wild hysterical cackle that you get into when you're drunk or what, you know, it wasn't that. It was a very healing thing, and I remember very well the very first time we all held, you know, I was there, and they said the Lord's Prayer, and it was just a tremendous surge. It was a very powerful thing, and a guy came up to me, and I was standing against the wall, looking at watching my friend get accolades and you know, and this guy came up and he started. He said, do you come here often? And I said, no, I'm with him. He's an alcoholic. And the guy said, oh, do you drink? And I said, well, sure I drink. He said, well, do you drink a lot? And I said, I drink. He said, well, how long have you drunk? And I tried to figure it was 9 years or something. And he said, can you, and he's asking the questions. It's like he's holding the cross up to the vampire. I mean, he is asking all the questions I don't want to think about. And he is not an imposing fellow, and he is being very kind about it, but he is between me and the door, and halfway through it, I am having visions of killing him, you know, and just saying, oh, you know, but he asked all the right questions. He said, well, could you quit? I said, well, sure, can't anybody, you know, and he said, well, why don't you then? And he gave me the 20 questions, and he said, fold them up and stick them in your... I said, I'll wear them on my damn sleeve. I don't care who knows I'm reading the 20 questions, doesn't it? You know, I was livid and deeply upset. And I went out with my friend and we talked, and I stayed sober at this guy for about 30 days, and I went back and he was nowhere to be found. And somebody else, and I told somebody, well, this guy got me. He said, well, can you, yeah, and he said, no, hey, try 30 days, and they said, well, why don't you try 60? You know, and so I did. But the thing was happening, we got active. Jimmy took us, you know, I'd drive, he'd drive, and we'd go down to Laguna on Fridays, and I got a sponsor in Laguna, because it was a toll call, and I knew he didn't have much money and wouldn't bother me. I wouldn't have to answer any more difficult questions. I could just go down and see him and use it as a dumping ground, and just kind of, and he was not into listening to dumping and stuff. I would go down and start off on my newcomer prattle. And you go, well, Tom, they really did this, and they did that. And he said, oh, great, I really want to hear this while you're vacuuming. Go over and do it. And so I'd be walking up and down, and I'd say, oh, my God, that man, like, give me that. And he'd heard it all anyway, and by the time I was finished talking, there was a clean patch of floor for the meeting and stuff. And the only way I knew about this town was through meetings. When I was drinking, if I had to go from 20th Century Fox to MGM, I would have to go back to Hollywood first, because I only know how to get there from there. I mean, that was then, and I'm still not that good at it. Every time I have to go from one place, I've got to go back to that apartment in Hollywood. No, it's not. But I mean, I just had no, you know. But now I started to know the city and where the meetings were. We go, you know, Brentwood on Thursday, Mulholland on Monday, and we just go all over. And it was wonderful. And I started meeting people. The problem was I didn't get into. I got into the fellowship. I didn't get into the steps, you might say. 1, 2, 3, you know, those steps. And what happened was, after a while, I held on a good long time just on fellowship, and whatever I said would read the first, you know, yes, I've read the big book, yes. And I read it, and it was puerile crap, and it was just, you know, and you could improve it this way, you could, you know, as Alan sees it, and things. I was on the fringe. I was just, you know, kind of going by waving and not into it. I had no commitments at meetings. I had nothing going on. And I was trying to stay far enough ahead of any sponsor stuff where he couldn't nail me and get me into it. And I managed to stay. I loved what the birthday lady said. It was, this is her last first birthday. I did 2.5 years. And I liked it so much I did it twice, you know. But at the end of that 2.5 years, and I got some resentments, and I cut back on going to meetings. I didn't read the big book as much, and I certainly didn't confide in any sponsors or anything. Didn't work on the steps, and a business thing happened. I said, that's it, and I was out of there. I got a joint from a friend, you know, and the next day I went out and bought 2 pounds. I didn't drink. Long about 4 months out, I needed something different, you know, and I knew what that was, and I knew that my fantasy was over. What I found out when I came in, my thing was, if it ever gets bad enough, I can always smoke dope again. Dope quit work, I was going to need a drink, and I was going to need a lot of drinks. And that answered my question to me, am I an alcoholic? And I came back, and it was different, because I was here for a reason now. I was here because I was an alcoholic. Then it was a matter of starting on the steps, and getting a sponsor, and another sponsor, one that was close by who could cause me trouble, and a guy named Fred. I presented, I did not get unarrogant immediately. I presented myself to him like a gift, and I had about 6. Yes, Fred, and he said, have you done your 4th step? How long have you been around? I said, 6 months. He said, have you done your 4th step? I said, well, it's in process, Fred. Yeah, I'm working on it. He said, you call me when it's done. And he walked away, and I needed a sponsor. So I went home and wrote my 4th step. And I called him the next day, and I wrote it on the back of an old script, which was as dramatic as I can get about it. And but I did it right out of the book. I did the thing right out of the. My first sentence, I remember it as plain as day, was, "I have no resentments against anybody." Except, wait, yeah, and then 12, 13, 14 pages later, the pen was burned out, and it was a short script, and so I read it to him, and the thing that happened when I read it to him was I felt the freedom. I mean, I really felt good and relieved, and that I was part of the program. And it took a little longer to get in it as deep. Now, I was able to hang around, again, without being an integral, I was able to hang around on the fringes for another 7 years. And then I ran into a guy, I go to the Roxbury Men's Stag, and I saw a bunch of people who looked good, who were really active people, who, I mean, when there was something going on, they were there. They were in the middle of it. And they were all sponsored by the same guy. And I wanted that. And because I could feel my inside thing just, I needed to work on my program. They were all sponsored by a guy named Ken O. So I said, Ken, will you be my sponsor? And he said, I will only ask you to do a few things, but if you refuse, find another sponsor. And we started off on the whole thing. I did another inventory. We went through the steps. I got commitments. I was over to, he said, one of the things he wanted me to do was start answering phones at central office. This is a real hoot down there, and I went over to read him my inventory, and he said, did you call central office and do the phone thing? I said, well, Ken, it's in process. I haven't called. He said, there's a phone. Call him. And I called and made my appointment and stuff. So I've been, answering phones down there for 10 years. And I got involved in some meetings. I became secretary of a meeting, and the meeting survived, And it became a different thing. I had a new bunch of friends, some from Fred, and then some from Ken. And it's funny, people who work the program hang out with people who work the program, usually. And Ken's thing was that one active member of Alcoholics Anonymous can pull along 10 others. And it's very true. It is also true that one drunk can, without half trying, affect 40 people, at least. So, but that's how the program was finally stirred in me, and how I finally had some of the results that I had been seeking, and just going. I had been going to meetings just to get. If the speaker was bad, I would say, "The hell with it." I would go to meet people, and for all the wrong reasons. I was not drinking, but I was not in. And finally, I got to go to meetings to be of service of some kind, whether it was picking something up or being there for somebody or anything. There are a lot of ways to be of service. And my favorite thing is anonymous service, and it's the phones, at central office, because nobody knows who you are or really cares, when they call. And it is quite interesting. One of the the nice things is calls from out of town, because I've traveled some and gone, you know, called central office and always have been treated fairly. And so what I do to pay them back is when they, you know, hi, I'm calling and I'm from Wyoming or something, and I say, well, we don't usually help people from Wyoming. But if you'll, you know, I guess in your case, he said, well, I'm special. And I said, okay, good, you know, we'll work it out. There is a vast amount of fun about it all, you know, and I got to work down there with Ken one time, and somebody called, and you can tell court people because they ask about the classes. And do you have any classes in my area, you know? And they're also a little touchy when you get on about classes. Is this because of a bad thing, perhaps, with the court? Well, yes, they screwed me over, and I'm, you know. I heard Ken get this call one time, and depending how bad you are, you get sentenced to so many meetings. You have to go to meetings, and I heard this incredulous, you know, Ken was really leading him on. He said, well, oh, you have to go to classes? Yes. He said, well, how many? He said, 6. My God, what'd you do, kill a cop? I talked to somebody yesterday who had been out. She had been in the program and had been out for a while, and just social drinking and stuff. She started to tell me the whole story. Oh, well, it's just you know, and I was just drinking this, that, and that. And I said, why are you calling? She said, well, I just wanted to find. I said, why are you calling? Well, I've started, and you know, I'm just going to have to start drinking more if I. So I guess why you're calling is, and we both said at the same time, I guess I've got to go to a meeting, you know. And so she, you know, it was fun. That happens sometimes. Most of it down there is information stuff. When is this meeting there? What? And one of the funnier things I heard was a friend of ours was talked to a newcomer at some meeting. And the newcomer was shaking, and the friend had the audacity to kind of point it out, to say maybe it'd be the shakes would go away if he quit drinking. You know, it might not be a half bad idea, and but if he was still of a mind that he might be able to drink again, he'd better go do it and just find out that he isn't, because that's a real important thing to know, is that I can't drink anymore, you know.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
So the lady called central office and complained about the guy that he was killing newcomers. You know, it's really, you run into all kinds. And some of them, there's a guy named Harvey who sits on the desk when he's down there, and some guys calling out are just horribly belligerent. You know, they're calling from a bar, and one guy just wanted to get into a fight or something, and I said, yeah, come on down. Come on down. And when you get here, just ask for me. Ask for Harvey. Harvey he was upset. But it's you know, I mean, the big event, of course, is the feeling that there is, not only is there a God, but that He is in my life, you know, and that's really big news. The more time passes, the things that I realize are, first of all, I believe now that the book is divinely inspired, because there's so much on every. I started out when I was reading the book, and I'd underline maybe one line on one page and skip 4 or 5 and skip something else. And then over a period of time, most of the book is just plain underlined. And I know if I'm having a problem, I have to look in part of the book that is not underlined, because I've missed something, you know. So that's that's that part of it. And but the God thing has been. I did not used to have the feeling of a personal contact with God, and some days I actually feel like I do. Some days I feel like I have a personal contact, and He's angry with me, you know. And some days I just feel totally blessed. Now, if I can remember, the nice thing about being regular at meetings is, first of all, I get to see the program work in you. And I get to see over a period of time, I get to see people go through life, work the steps, follow the principles, and they come through it. I have never been disappointed in watching this process. I have been in great pain when I have been going through the process myself, but because of what I have seen in you, I have had the faith that it was okay, that it was going to be okay. Ken used to say, in God's ecology, there is no waste. Everything that I go through has a reason. Even if it is just to be able to tell somebody who is new that you can go through that and not drink. The theory that I'm working on is not even a theory. It's just, you know, over time you categorize the program, you explain it different ways, or it makes sense to you different ways. And the way it makes sense to me now is I have the choice of the first step, that I'm powerless over alcohol and my life is unmanageable. That was a condition that existed, and I can still live in that if I want to. I have to admit it to my innermost self that is the truth. But on the other side of it is step two, where I come to believe that first of all, believe in a power greater than myself, and believe that there is a power greater than myself that can restore me to sanity. And that's the hope thing. That's the cure for all the broken body parts that we may exhibit. You know, that's where the hope comes in, and the things that we do in the remaining steps up to 12 are the things that put us in that context of being the best people we can be, that God can work through, that God can talk to. Now, I'm not saying that somebody who's drunk is not carrying a message. They carry a very strong message to me, and the message is, I don't want to be like that anymore. I was like that. The message that I can carry to the drunk is, I used to be like you, and you don't have to be like that anymore if you do these things. Because I see it here, I see it there. I have real friends in this program today. You know, I have people that I admire very, very much, and I have a life today because of Alcoholics Anonymous. Every good thing that has happened to me, and there have been many, is a direct result of my association with Alcoholics Anonymous and God. See, I had to find AA first, and then AA showed me God. And it isn't always easy to keep it, you know. I have to do something most every day, and I have to try. And I have one friend in here who is, well, there's two now because I talked to him before the meeting, but who knows that some days just, you know, it's not the prettiest thing in town. Some days are just rough, but you go through them sober, and you do the best you can. You don't drink. And favorite thing I've heard recently is, we're a room full of people that are just shooting for midnight. Man, don't drink today. Go for midnight, you know. And that's hope. There's hope in that, you know, and there's God's grace in that. And it's getting close enough to midnight for me, you know, and I really want to thank you for the privilege of being here, and God bless you all.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. to install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.